Today I will be demonstrating how to colour fire using this design from Colouring Heaven issue 90 Elemental by Anne Stokes. I will be working with Prismacolor pencils. As the flames are quite small on this image, I've actually cropped it and printed the flames out on a larger scale so you can see what I'm doing more easily. So I'll move that one out the way, and here we are, some larger flames. Now, as usual, I'll start by looking at some images that are available on the internet, copyright free. These ones are from Unsplash. Let's look at this one because it's the most like what we're actually doing. You can see that the fire is the palest yellow in the areas that are the hottest, which is usually at the source of the fire. The colours then blend into darker yellows, oranges, and even reds, and really dark areas which are almost black. And one thing that I hadn't realised before is that flames sometimes have really distinct edges, like you can see there and there and there. And then actually these ones are distinct, they're all distinct. Now moving back to our design. The artist has already drawn in the flame pattern for us, so we can follow their design. And what I'm going to assume is that the black lines represent the darkest parts of the flames. Now remember that fire is very free flowing, and as you could see in the photographs, it takes a lot of different shapes and patterns, so there's really no right or wrong way of doing it. Now I'm going to start looking at the lightest areas using cream, which is going to be my lightest colour. So that is PC914 and Deco Yellow, PC1011. And I'm going to use those to do initial swirls in the very hottest areas of the flame. And I'm working in the middle of the flames because the outer areas are going to be a little bit darker. So I'm using directional strokes with quite a firm pressure, and it doesn't matter if your shading ends up with lines in it. So this isn't one where you have to be really careful and blend, because as we saw from the photographs, fire actually has lines in it. Here we go. So I'm just doing really free-flowing strokes, following the shapes that the artist has given us. I guess in some ways it's actually a little bit like drawing hair. When I was working out how I was going to colour this, I did look very closely, particularly at this photograph, and I actually used some of the patterns and colouring from this photograph to inform what I was doing. So some of these areas I'm going to make the hottest. I'm actually colouring in almost completely. So on this bit I'm actually colouring the whole of this area in. Now I'm back to my lines again. Now I'm going to use the Deco Yellow, and what I'm doing is on the hot areas down here, I'm colouring from the cream to the black lines and expanding on the cream areas. Going right up here. Actually, I'm going to make this centre part a bit creamier. There we go. I've decided, I think what I'm going to do to remind myself, I've decided that some of these swirls, if we go back and look at the photograph again, I'm going to identify some areas where I'm going to make a dark swirl. So it's going to be like a dark area like this, or like this, or like this. So I'm just going to put a little bit of poppy red PC922 in those areas, just to remind me that those are going to be dark. So I'll just put in a little touch here. I'm going to make this swirl dark here, and this bit here, and this bit here. Then I'm going to make a dark. What I'm doing is I'm actually carrying on some of these dark lines. So I'm adding lines myself. There, so that's just to remind me that those are going to be dark. Now I'm going to carry on with the Deco yellow. Still shading from the cream to the edge, and then where there isn't any cream, the Deco yellow will then be in the centre of the flame. So up here. There, so I've ended up with quite a lot of the design covered in cream and Deco yellow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a similar method, so working with the darker colours around the dark lines. I'm going to gradually build it up using darker and darker shades. So the next colour I'm going to use is yellowed orange, PC1002. And with this I'm going to start making a more clear demarcation of which areas are going to be dark and which are going to be light. So starting down here in the lightest part, and I'm going to put some of this just around the darkest lines. Again, using directional strokes. And then what I'm doing is I'm going to start putting in, as I was saying, I'm actually adding more swirls on top of the dark lines that the artist has already given us. And this is the colour that I'm using to really start to build those swirls in. So I'm going to have a swirl going from this dark line here. I'm sort of following the line of the dark line, but I'm carrying it on, and I'm going to do a swirl up here, join this dark line and go round like this, all the way up. I'm keeping the yellow at the centre there, all the way up here. I have to put a bit more in up here. And then this swirl is going to carry on up here and round. And that bit, I'm going to follow this dark line, continue it round like that, then follow this round like here. Then this is going to carry on. I'm going to leave, as this is at the heart of the fire, I'm going to leave this whole area pale. So I'm just going to pick the orange up here, bring it round, join it to this line here. So I'm using the dark lines that the artist has provided as a starting point really, and joining them up and building in more swirls. So I can join these two together actually, there we go. So I'm leaving that bit to be dark, but then I'm going to put a bit of orange here. There isn't really a rule about how you would do this, just making up patterns as you go. So I'm just going to carry on building patterns. It doesn't matter if at this stage the lines are a little bit rough, because we're going to go over it with more and more layers of colour. As we get to the ends of the flames, as these are going to be a cooler area, I'm putting in more orange. I'll put a bit of a swirl in there. Oh, I'm going to put another dark bit in here. So I'll just put that in to remind me. And what I'm going to do is, because I'm colouring the whole image at once, it's probably a good idea if I just put a piece of paper I'll just fold this piece of paper in half. I'm just going to put, so when I'm working on the area up this end, I'm going to rest my hand on a piece of paper so I don't smudge what I've already done down there. So this is a long way from the fire, so I'm going to make a lot of this orange. I'm going to invent a bit of flame here. Let's carry this swirl on a bit. So I've basically now built up the framework of the swirls and lines and patterns that I'm going to include in the flames. And what I'm going to do now is gradually build up more and more layers of colour to give it depth and brightness. So I'm going to use the poppy red, and I'm going to be a little bit more methodical this time, so I'm going to start up at this end and gradually work my way across. So I'm focusing on the dark lines with this and the tips of the flames. And I'm putting in even more swirls as I go, so I'm going to put one in there. And I'm going to start doing a little bit of blending, especially working from the tip if I'm going into a lighter area of frame. So what I'm doing here is I'm just using a firm pressure at the end and then lightening the pressure as I move down the flame. Firm pressure around the darkest area and then just lightening up, so I'm getting a bit of a blend. It's still looking a bit pale at the moment, don't worry, we're going to be going in with a lot more colours yet. Now this is a bit of a funny shape, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make all of this curve is going to be a darker shade, blending in, and it's going to come round here, join these flames, and I'm going to invent a little bit of flame here. I think I'll take that round here as well, give it a bit more shape. There we go. So again here I'm using firm pressure around the edge and then lighter pressure strokes as I move in towards the centre of the flame. Doing the same with all of these dark lines. So the tips of all the flames pretty much are going to be red, and all the areas where the flame touches the background, that's always going to be the coolest part. So all of these edges are going to be reds. I'm going to carry this on a bit and make another little flame here. And we're going to start building out these darker areas now. And again, I'm using firmer strokes in the centre, in the darkest part, and then lighter pressure to blend a little bit. So it's another dark area, so I'm going to use a firm pressure here, then gradually reduce the pressure. I'm going to leave this dark line and make it into a spark later on. And I'm actually going to leave, if we look back at this photograph, we've got these sharp lines. I'm going to leave this. It's quite a sharp line, and I'm going to build up a contrast between the dark and the light. Put a little bit of a swirl there, just by increasing the pressure. So again, I've blended here, I've used firm pressure here and then gradually lightened it up to get a blend down into the orange. I'm going to join this dark area to this line here with another swirl. Stop for a sharpen. So I'm going to put another sharp line, sharp divide here between the darker and the light. Gone over the edge a little bit there. Let's just get rid of that with my electric eraser. And then I use this, it's called a drafting brush, to brush away. I can either brush away the bits of rubber that have been left behind, and it's good for brushing away pigment as well. This is a Faber-Castell. Yeah, and this eraser, it's a Derwent. It's rechargeable, which is really good. And you can get it with a fine point or a thicker point. And I use it with the fine point pretty much all the time, because as well as being good for making little corrections, it's also really good for erasing colour that you've already laid down to make highlights. So the next stage is an even darker red, which is PC924, crimson red. This is quite a bit darker. So I'll start up here again. So this is a lovely rich dark shade of red. I'm very much keeping to the tips of the flames and the dark lines. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my poppy red handy as well, because I might want to do a little bit of extra blending around where I've put the crimson red. So I'm just going around the very edge here with the crimson red, blending it a little bit. So this is really starting to give us some depth now with our colours. Where you're colouring over the crimson or other colours, you can use quite a firm pressure to get a nice rich bright colour. Then it's still looking quite flat. We've got our light areas and our dark areas marked in, but what I'm going to do now is put in more detail and more colour to lift it. So the next colour I'm going to use is Canary Yellow, PC916, and I'm going to use it in the lighter areas to brighten them up a lot. So I'm using it to go around the area from the orange towards the centre of the flames. And at the same time, I'm going to use the Deco yellow in the centre to brighten that up as well. But I'm still going to leave some areas light. So again, if we look at the photograph, there are still some very light areas, even quite away from the centre of the fire. So I'm going to keep some of those in. And down in the very hottest part of the flame, I'm putting in a few extra swirls in this yellow. Right, I'm now going to use this. Now this colour is really going to brighten it up. I'm going to use orange, PC918. Now I'm going to do a blend here. And I'm actually going over with the orange. I'm going over some of the darker areas just to blend in the colour, brighten it up even more. I've got quite a sharp point on this orange as well, so you can put in some thinner lines as well, because you'll get streaks of a darker colour kind of coming down the middle of some of the flames. Here we go, so I'm putting some lines down here. So again, I'm putting in some extra orange lines, just carrying on the swirly pattern. Let's do one here. And again, what you'll find is that if you use a firm pressure, you can almost completely cover up the underlying colours, but the underlying yellow rather, but if you then lighten the pressure, you get a nice blend from orange to yellow. Now this bit I'm going to make much more vibrant. So I'm blending the edges of the dark areas with the orange as well. I'm going to make them darker in a minute, but I'm just joining them into the rest of the fire now with the orange. Then if you find a bit that you want to blend more, I'm going to use my yellowed orange again, just to blend a little bit more there. Yeah, and just check along your edge that you haven't left any white bits, unless you mean it to be white. Now I'm going to do the dark areas, and I'm going to be using raspberry PC1030 and black raspberry PC1095. So starting with these patches we've identified as dark here, I'm going to start off with the raspberry. So I'm blending with the raspberry over the top of all the other colours, which is one of the good things about Prismacolors, because they are very good at layering one on top of the other to build up a really nice complex shade. So I've covered it in raspberry, and then the very darkest bit is going to be black raspberry. So quite a dramatic dark shade. So raspberry again here. And a bit of black raspberry. Same thing here. Let's move it right up that swirl. Then I'm going to look at the rest of the flames and just put in a few darker streaks with the raspberry and the black raspberry. And I'm also going to darken the tips of some of the flames with the raspberry shade, even the black raspberry. You can see how just putting some of these really dark low lights is making the flames look really three-dimensional. I'll just accentuate this bit of swirl here with the raspberry. Right, I'm just going to clear off any bits of pigment that are lying around. Then the final thing I'm going to do is sharpen some of my pencils. So I'm going to use the orange, the canary yellow and the crimson red, and I'm just going to go over the whole thing and fill in any gaps and also put in some more detail. So I'll just have a sharpen. I'm using a Prismacolor sharpener here. I think I've got it in a set. I'm not sure if you can buy them separately. But if you can get hold of one, it's a good idea, because Prismacolors can be a bit temperamental and have a bit of a tendency to break when you sharpen them. If we go back to the photograph I've been using, you can see that it's got some fairly fine lines in it. So that's what I'm putting in at the moment. So particularly with the crimson red, I'm going to put in some fine lines. I'm going to make some of them have a little bit of a kind of a blob in it, so it looks a bit like sparks inside the flame. Joining up some of the swirls as well. I'm keeping these bits white or light, but I'm putting a bit more yellow around the edges. So I'm going to put a blobby line in here, take it all the way around there, put another line in here to make this a bit more orange. I'm actually going to put a dark bit in the light area, which just makes it look a bit more dramatic. And then I'm going to put quite a few orange swirls in here, because this area is looking a little bit dull. So I'm just accentuating this curve here. I'm just going to sharpen up yellowish orange, do a bit with that as well. And then I'm going to provide a little bit of contrast by actually putting in a tiny bit of the crimson red. Right, then I'm just going to carry on. Right, just check it over. I'm not very happy with that bit. So I'll just colour it back in with the yellow. My little streaks didn't look quite right, so let's put them in again. There we go. Right, I think I'm going to stop there, and the next thing I'm going to do is just go over a few spots with the burnisher, which is my Derwent burnisher. This is a colourless, it's a pencil with a colourless lead. I'm just getting, what you have to do, it's quite important before you use it, is rub it, just to make sure you haven't got any other colours left on the end. This is a colourless pencil. It goes over your colour pencil and shines it. Not to be confused with a blender. I've got a blender here. They look the same. This is a Prismacolor blender in that they're both colourless. The burnisher gives a kind of polished finish, but what a blender does is it actually mixes together the different layers of pigment that you've put onto the paper. But we don't want to do that here, so we don't want to use a blender. We want to use a burnisher. So I'm just going over some of the, particularly the darker areas, where there might be a little bit of tooth from the paper showing through. Just gives a nice smooth finish. Yeah, it's particularly good if you've got the odd area where it's meant to be dark, but you've still got a few little bits of the tooth showing through. I don't need it everywhere, just on, particularly on the darker areas. You can see the difference that it's making. Okay, that's that done. I'm going to go over once more with my brush, and then I'm going to start thinking about the background. Yeah, I'm going to finish there because I could quite happily keep on doing this forever, so I better stop. So background now. The first thing I'm going to do for the background is, looking back at this photograph, you could see we've got sparks and flecks of flame that are being spat up by the fire into the background. So I'm going to start off by putting in some of those. I'm going to use the crimson red. So I'm going to make this quite a big bit of flame. Then I'm just going to put sparks. I'm making them shaped like a little tadpole actually, because that's the embers, and then they've got a little stream of flame behind them, and I'm aligning them in a lot of cases with the tips of the flame. There, we'll have one here, bigger one there. Right, so I'm going to put in one orange one actually, just here, coming out from this orange. So that's all my sparks. Now, thinking about the background. Now you could just do the background black or a dark colour, but what I want to do is make the background, make the flames seem as bright as possible. So I'm going to use a bit of colour theory here. So I've got this colour wheel, which Colouring Heaven provides in the resources section of their website. So if we look at two colours on the opposite sides of the colour wheel, orange and blue. They're called complementary colours. Now, if you mix them together, they'll make rather a dull, muddy colour. But if you put them side by side, they'll provide a high contrast and high impact colour combination, making the colours appear brighter and more prominent. So just a quick demonstration on this piece of paper I've been using as a rest. So if you put orange and then blend it in with blue, I don't know if you can see that, you get a kind of muddy purpley brown. But if you put them side by side, the blue makes the orange seem a lot brighter. So what I'm going to do for the background is I'm going to introduce, as we're working with yellow, orange and reds, I'm going to introduce sort of violets, blue violets and blues into the background. So let's get started. So I'm going to start with dark purple. I'm going to do this quite quickly and then use an alcohol blender. So I'm going around the edges of the flame with the dark purple, which is a slightly warmer colour. So I'm colouring quite roughly because I'm going to go over with a blender pen. And then I'm going to go back to my flame colours. Now actually I'm going to pick out a different colour that I haven't used before. It's called Crimson Lake, PC925. And I'm just going to use that to go around the edge of the flames and blend into the purple, because the flames will be giving out a bit of a glow of light. And we especially want to make sure there aren't any gaps showing between the flames and the background. Right, well that's broken, but it doesn't matter, I won't sharpen it. I'm going to just pick up my raspberry instead, which will do a pretty similar job. Right, there we go. Next I'm going to use indigo blue, PC901. Right, I'm mixing up the purple and the blue to get a nice dark shade. I'm now going to use a colour called Dioxazine Purple Hue, which is a nice dark purpley blue. I'm going to fill in the rest of the background using that. Right, I'm just going to turn it on its side so I can get an even colour. Let's go over some patches with the indigo blue, perhaps a bit of purple. Then we're going to go over the top with black, PC935. But what you'll find is you've still got some of the colour that we've put on underneath showing through, so you're actually, rather than just getting a plain black background, you're getting a nice subtle mix of darker tones. Put a bit more colour into the sparks and some of the edges of the flames where I've got bits of white still showing. And now I'm going to finish it off with a blender pen. This is actually a Derwent. It's a colourless alcohol-based marker. Again, before you use it, it's a good idea to rub it on a piece of paper. Get rid of any colour left over. Now I'm going to do my blending in a vertical motion, like this, colouring away from the flames. This is because the blender tends to carry a little bit of colour with it, but I don't want to end up with the kind of black right round close to the edge of the flame. There we go, miraculously transforming my rough shading into a smooth surface. This is a really good tool for, particularly for doing backgrounds like this, where you've got a large area of colour that you want to get a smooth finish to. There, that's that section done. And if you want to add more colour or more black, you can, once you've blended an area, you can go back. Like I could put a bit more indigo blue there, for example. You can go back in and colour over the top if you want to. So now I'm going to do exactly the same thing for this section. So I'll just do it as a speed colour. There, that's the background done. So I'll just go around and fill in any gaps around the edges. There we go. All finished. I hope you enjoyed this video. All the colours that I've used are shown down below in the description box. And don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out on future videos.